Chapter 13. Fixing the Nets. Sir Henry was more pleased than surprised to see Sherlock Holmes, for he had for some days been expecting that recent events would bring him down from London. He did raise his eyebrows, however, when he found that my friend had neither any baggage nor any explanations for its absence. Between us, we soon supplied his wants, and then over the belated supper we explained to the baronet as much of our experience as it seemed desirable that he should know. But first, I had the unpleasant duty of breaking the news of Selden's death to Barrymore and his wife. To him it may have been an unmitigated relief, but she wept bitterly in her apron. To all the world he was the man of violence, half animal and half demon. But to her he always remained the little wilful boy of her own girlhood, the child who had clung to her hand. Evil indeed is a man who has not one woman to mourn for him. "I've been moping in the house all day since Watson went off this morning," said the baronet. "I guess I should have had some credit, for I kept my promise. If I hadn't sworn not to go alone, it might have been a more lively evening, for I had a message from Stapleton asking me over there." "I have no doubt that you would have had a more lively evening," said Holmes dryly. "By the way, I don't suppose you appreciate that we have been mourning over you as having broken your neck." Sir Henry opened his eyes. "How is that?" "This poor wretch was dressed in your clothes. I fear your servant who gave them to him might have get into trouble with the police." "That is unlikely. There was no mark of any of them, as far as I know." "That's lucky for him." "In fact, it's lucky for you all, since you are all on the wrong side of the law in this matter. I am not sure that as a conscientious detective my first duty is not to arrest the whole household. Watson's reports are most incriminating documents." "But how about the case?" asked the baronet. "Have you made anything out of the tangle? I don't know what Watson and I are much the wiser since we came down." "I think that I shall be in a position to make the situation more clear to you long before. It has been an exceedingly difficult and most complicated business. There are several points which will the same once in light, but it is coming, all the same. We've had one experience, as Watson has no doubt told you. We heard the Hound on the moor, and I can swear that it is not all empty superstition. We had something to do with dogs out when I was in the West, and I know one when I hear one. If you can muzzle that one and put a chain on, I'll be ready to swear to you the greatest detective of all time." "I think I will muzzle him and chain him all right, if you will give me your help." "Whatever you tell me to do, I will do." "Very good. And I will ask you also to do it blandly, without always asking the reason." "Just as you like." "If you will do this, I think the chances that our little problem will soon be all solved." "I have no doubt." He stopped suddenly and stared fixedly up over my head into the air. The lamp beat upon his face, and it was so intense, was it, that it was still that it might have been that of a clear-cut classical statue. a personification of alertness and expectation. "What is it?" we both cried. I could see as he looked down that he was repressing some internal emotion. His features were still composed, but his eyes shone with amused exultation. "Excuse the admiration of a connoisseur," he said as he waved his hands toward the line of portraits which covered the opposite wall. "Watson won't allow that I know anything of art, but this is mere jealousy, because our views upon the subject differ. Now these are really very fine series of portraits." "Well, I'm glad to hear you say so," said Sir Henry, glancing with some surprise at my friend. "I don't pretend to know much about these things, but I'd be a better judge of a horse or a steer than of a picture. I didn't know that you were found time for such things." "I know what is good when I see it, and I see it now. That's another, I swear. That's the lady in the blue silk over yonder, and the stout gentleman with the wig ought to be a Reynolds. They are all family portraits, I presume." "Everyone." "Do you know the names?" "Barrymore has been coaching me in them. I think I can say my lessons fairly well." "Who is the gentleman with the telescope?" "That is Rear Admiral Baskerville, who served under Rodney in the West Indies. The man in the blue coat and the roll of paper is Sir William Baskerville, who was chairman of the committee of the House of Commons under Pitt. And this cavalier opposite to me, the one with the black velvet on and the lace." "You have the right to know about him. That was the cause of all this mischief, the wicked Hugo, who started the Hound of the Baskervilles. We're not likely to forget him." I gazed with interest and some surprise upon the portrait. "Dear me," said Holmes, "he seems to be quite meek-mannered man enough, but I dare say that there is a lurking devil in his eyes. I had pictured him as a more robust and ruffianly person." "There's no doubt about the authenticity, for the name and the date, 1647, are on the back of the canvas." Holmes said little more, but the picture of the old roisterer seemed to have a fascination for him, and his eyes were continually fixed upon it during supper. It was not until hours later, when Sir Henry had gone to his room, that I was able to follow the trend of his thoughts. He led me to the back into the banquet hall, his bedroom candle in his hand, and held it against the time-stained portrait on the wall. "Do you see anything there?" I looked at the broad-plumed hat, the curling love-locks, the white lace collar, and the straight, severe face which was framed between them. It was not a brutal countenance, but it was a prim, hard, and stern, with a firm-set, thin-lipped mouth, and a coldly intolerant eye. "Is it like anyone you know?" "There is something of Sir Henry about it. Just a suggestion, perhaps. But wait an instant." He stood up on the chair, and holding up the light in his left behind, he curved his right arm round the broad hat and over round ringlets. "Good heavens!" I cried in amazement. The face was Stapleton, had sprung out of the canvas. "Ha! You see it now. My eyes have been trained to examine faces, and not their trimmings. It's the first quality of a criminal investigator, that he should see through a disguise." "This is marvelous. It might have been a portrait." "Yes. It is an interesting instance of throwback, which appears to be both physical and spiritual. A study of family portraits is enough to convert a man to the doctrine of reincarnation. The fellow is a Baskerville. That is evidence. With designs upon his succession. Exactly. This chance of the picture has supplied us with one of our most obviously missing links. We have him, Watson, we have him. And I dare swear that not before tomorrow night he will be fluttering in our nets and helpless as one of his own butterflies. A pen, a cork, and a card. We will add him to our own Baker Street collection. I burst into one of his rare fits of laughter as he turned away from the picture. I have not heard him laugh often, and it has always boded ill to anybody. I was always bedtimes in the morning, but Holmes was a foot earlier still, for I saw him as I dressed coming up the drive. Yes, we should have a full day today, he remarked as he rubbed his hands with joy of action. The nets are all in place, and about the drag is about to begin. We'll know before today is out whether we have caught our big, lean-jawed pike, or whether he has got through our meshes. Have you been to the moor already? I've sent a report from Grimpen to Princeton as to the death of Selden. I think I can promise that none of you will be troubled in the matter. And I have also communicated with my old faithful Cartwright, who would certainly have pined away at the door of my hut as a dog does at his master's grave, if I had not set his mind at rest about my safety. So what is our next move? To see Sir Henry. Ah, here he is. Good morning, Holmes, said the baronet. You look like a general who is planning a battle with his chief of staff. That is the exact situation. Watson was asking for others. And so do I. Very good. You are engaged, as I understand, to dine with our friends at Stapleton tonight. I hope that you will come also. They are very hospitable people, and I am sure that they would be very glad to see you. I feel that Watson and I must go to London. To London? Yes, I think that we will be more useful there than at the present juncture. Baronet's face fell perceptibly lengthened. I hope that you are going to see me through this business. The hall and the moor are not very pleasant places when one is alone. My dear fellow, you must trust me implicitly and do exactly what I tell you. You can tell your friends that we should have been happy to have come with you, but that urgent business required us to be in town. We hope that very soon to return to Devonshire. Will you remember to give them that message? If you insist upon it. There is no alternative, I assure you. I saw by the baronet's clouded brow that he was now deeply hurt by what he had regarded as our desertion. When do you desire to go? He asked coldly. Immediately after breakfast. We will drive into Combe Tracy, but Watson will leave his things as a pledge that he will come back to you. Watson, you will send a note to Stapleton and tell him that you regret that you cannot come. I have a good mind to go to London with you, said the baronet. Why should I stay here alone? Because it is your post of duty. Because you give your word that you would stay here and do as you are told. And I tell you to stay. All right, then. I'll stay. One more direction. I wish you to drive to Merripit House. Send back your trap, however, and do not let them know that you intend to walk home. To walk across the moor? Yes. But that is the very thing you have so often cautioned me out of doing. This time you may do it with safety. If I had not every confidence in your nerve and courage, I would not suggest it. But it is essential that you should do it. I will do it. And as you value your life and do not go across the moor in any direction save along the straight path which leads from Merripit House to the Grimpen Road, and is your natural way home. I will do just what you say. Very good. I shall be glad to get away as soon as breakfast is over, so to reach London in the afternoon. I was much astounded by his program, though I remembered that Holmes had said to Stapleton on the night before that his visit would be terminated the next day. I had not crossed my mind, however, that he would wish me to go with him, nor could I understand how we could both be absent in the moment of the which he himself declared to be critical. There was nothing for it, however, but implicit obedience. So we bade good-bye to our rueful friend, and a couple of hours afterwards we were at the station at Coombe Tracey, and had dispatched the trap upon its journey home. A small boy was waiting upon the platform. "Any order, sir?" "You will take this train to town, Cartwright. The moment you arrive, you will send a wire to Sir Henry Baskerville in my name to say that he finds the pocket-book which I have dropped. He is to send it by registered post to Baker Street." "Yes, sir." "And ask at the station office if there is a message for me." The boy returned with a telegram, which Holmes handed to me. It ran, "Wire received, coming down with unsigned words. Arrive 5:40. Lestrade." Go Lady Lestrade. That is an answer to mine of this morning. He is the best of the professionals, I think, and we may need his assistance. Now, Watson, I think that we cannot employ our time better than by calling upon our acquaintance, Mrs. Laura Lyons. His plans of campaign was beginning to be evident. We would use the baronet in order to convince the Stapletons that we were really gone, while we should actually return the instant we are likely to be in need. That telegram from London, if mentioned by Sir Henry, the Stapletons must remove the last suspicions from their minds. Already I seem to be in our nets, drawing closer round the lean-jawed pike. Miss Laura Lyons was in her office, and Sherlock Holmes opened his interview with a frankness and directness which considerably amazed her. "I am investigating the circumstances which attained the death of the late Sir Charles Baskerville," he said. "My friend here, Dr. Watson, has informed me what of you have communicated and also of what you have withheld in connection to that matter." "What have I withheld?" she asked defiantly. "You have confessed that you asked Sir Charles to be at the gate at 10 o'clock. We know that this was the place and hour of his death. You have withheld this connection between these events." "There is no connection." "In that case, the coincidence must indeed be an extraordinary one. But I think that we shall succeed in establishing a connection after all. I wish to be perfectly frank with you, Miss Lyne. We regard this case as one of murder, and the evidence may implicate not only your friend Mr. Stapleton, but his wife as well." The lady sprang from her chair. "His wife!" she cried. "In fact, it is no longer a secret. The person who has passed for a sister is really his wife." Mrs. Lyons had resumed her rest. Her hands were grasping the arms of her chair, and I saw that the pink nails were turned white with the pressure of her grip. "His wife," she said again. "His wife. He was not a married man." Sherlock Holmes shrugged his shoulders. "Prove it to me! Prove it to me! And if you can do so—" The fierce flash in her eyes said more than any words possibly could. "I have come prepared to do so," said Holmes, drawing several papers from his pocket. "Here is a photograph of the couple taken in New York 4 years ago. It is endorsed Mr. and Mrs. Vandeleur, but you will have no difficulty in recognizing her, and her also, if you know her by sight. Here are 3 written descriptions in trustworthiness witnesses by Mr. and Mrs. Vandeleur, who at the time kept St. Oliver's private school. Read them, and see if you can doubt the identity of these people." She glanced at them, and then looked up at us with the set, rigid face of a desperate woman. "Mr. Holmes," said she, "this man had offered me marriage on the condition that I could get a divorce from my husband. He has lied to me, the villain, in every conceivable way. Not one word of truth has he ever told me. And why? Why? I imagined that all was for my own sake. But now I see that I was never anything but a tool in his hands. Why should I preserve faith in him who has never kept any in me? Why should I try to shield him from the consequences of his own wicked acts? Ask me what you like. There is nothing which I shall hold back. One thing I swear to you is that when I wrote the letter I never dreamed of any harm to the old gentleman, who had been my kindest friend." "I entirely believe you, madam," said Sherlock Holmes. "The recital of these events must be very painful to you, and perhaps it will make it easier if I tell you what occurred, and you can check me if any ministerial mistakes occur. The sending of this letter was suggested to you by Stapleton." "He dictated it." "I presume that the reason he gave was that you would receive help from Sir Charles for the legal expenses connected to your divorce?" "Exactly." "And then, after you had sent the letter, he dissuaded you from keeping the appointment." "He told me that it would hurt his self-respect that any other man should find the money for such an object, and that though he was a poor man himself, he would devote his last penny to removing the obstacles which divided us." Hmm. "He appears to be a very consistent character. And then you heard nothing until the paper reported the death in the papers." "No." "And he made you swear to say nothing about your appointment with Sir Charles." "He did. He said that the death was the most mysterious one, and that I should ever certainly be suspected when the facts came out. He frightened me into remaining silent." "What so?" She hesitated and looked down. "I knew him," she said. "But if he had kept faith in me, I should always have done with him." "I think that on the whole you have had a fortunate escape," said Sherlock Holmes. "You have had him in your power and have knew it, and yet you are alive. You have been walking for some months very near to the edge of a precipice. We must wish you good morning now, Miss Lyons, and it is probable that you will very shortly hear from us again." Our case becomes rounded off, and difficulty after difficulty thins away in front of us, said Holmes as we stood waiting for our arrival to express to town. I shall soon be in the position of being able to put a single connected narrative, one of the most singular and sensational crimes of modern times. Students of criminology will remember this analogous incidents of Rondo, Little Russia, in the year of 66, and of course Carolina, and the case possesses of some features which are entirely its own. Even now we have no clear case against the very wily man, but I shall be very much surprised if it is not clear enough before we go to bed tonight. The London Express came roaring into the station, and a small, wiry bulldog of a man had sprung from the first-class carriage. We all three shook hands, and I saw at once that the reverential way in which Lestrade gazed at my companion that he had learned a good deal since the days in which they had first worked together. I could well remember the scorn which the theories of the reasoner had used then to excite the practical man. Anything good? He asked. The biggest thing is odds, said Holmes. We have 2 hours before we need to get starting. I think we might employ it in getting some dinner, and then, Lestrade, we will take the London fog out of your throat by giving you a breath of the pure night air of Dartmoor. Never been there? Ah, well, I don't suppose you will forget your first visit.